Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Leslie Briggs. I do product marketing for the Gradescope team, and we're thrilled to have you for this morning's Power User Top 10, Ignite Your Gradescope Love Affair. Today's presentation will be hosted by Christa Hayes, an instructor at Montana State University who has been using Gradescope successfully since the summer of 2017. If you have any questions throughout today's presentation, please do not hesitate and post them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We will be happy to share a copy of this recording for anyone that is not able to attend live or any colleagues that you wish to share this recording with after the fact. And thank you all again for joining us, and we'll go ahead and get things started. Thanks, Christa.
Thank you. Let me try to figure out how to get out of this slide. Oh boy. Oh, there it is. All right. I just want to make sure that you can see my full screen without any extra noise.
We can see your screen and the banner at the top. All good.
Okay. So we'll go here. Yeah, so I'm hoping to share with you today some tips based on my experience using Gradescope quite a bit over the last couple of years. And it's my hope that you leave here with something that's going to enhance your workflow, whether you're coming at this as a beginner or having used Gradescope quite a bit yourself for a while. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is based on what I've learned through my own use of Gradescope, and also based on what my team has shared with me as being really helpful to them. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a faculty member at Montana State University. That's what you see down here. It looks a little different right now. We have a lot of snow up in the mountains. But at MSU, I have been the student success coordinator for multivariable calculus, which is a course with roughly 300 to 500 students, depending on when we offer it and what's going on with enrollment. And for that course, I lead a team of instructors. I also teach the class myself, and we collect work and grade that work daily. So it's a lot of grading that we're doing, and Gradescope has been a tool that has been absolutely invaluable to us in terms of giving meaningful and timely feedback to our students. This is what my tools used to look like before Gradescope. Me and my team would collect homework, and we'd have students stick them into these different color-coded folders based on their last names. And then we would grade these huge piles of work and use this alphabetizer so that we could get them into alphabetical order and somehow enter these into the grade book. Thankfully, those days are long gone, and we're able to do a lot more meaningful grading much more efficiently and effectively. So, just because I heard that some of you may be new to Gradescope, I wanted to give you a quick overview of kind of what it is and how it works, the 10-second bird's eye view. But essentially, what you do is give an assignment, scan and upload those assignments that you can then grade online as a team. After you're done grading, all the stats are immediately at your fingertips. All the points have been tallied. Everything is attached to names in Gradescope itself, the student names, and you can download those grades in the click of a mouse or stroke of a key, and then that work is immediately returned to students. If you have any questions about this, I'm sure that Leslie will follow up with more information. I just wanted to make sure to be very inclusive of folks who maybe are new to how Gradescope works. So the first tip that I have for you is a technology tip, and this is essentially what my toolkit looks like now. I use a pen and a mouse and my laptop And I know that not everyone has the luxury of getting some sort of touch screen, and some people are somewhat mouse averse, and for those of you who are in that category, hotkeys are definitely awesome in Gradescope. So that would be my first tip, is a mouse can be an absolute game changer. Pretty simple, but an important one. Then the next collection of tips that I compiled is related to assignment writing and document formatting. I've really changed my approach to how I think about writing some of these assignments so that I can use Gradescope in a very powerful way to give more feedback more efficiently. And the first one of those things is that I've learned when giving multiple choice questions that the best thing to do is ask students to bubble in that multiple choice option and not circle it. It just allows Gradescope to work more seamlessly in terms of identifying what those student responses are. And then in terms of multiple choice related to that, I have really broadened my perspective. My team has broadened their perspective of what it means to write a multiple choice problem and how we can use that. In terms of multiple choice, there's this option that exists to always have students show their work, even if they're bubbling in one of the possible answers that we're giving here that's not the correct answer. So in our course, what we do when we have a multiple choice question is we absolutely take into consideration and require often that students will show their work in order to earn full credit. But what this multiple choice bubbling option does is it helps us categorize the solution responses more quickly with Gradescope. And by more quickly, I mean within a few seconds. So that we can then start to find different types of mistakes that students are making and give feedback based on those mistakes. Not only that, but I mean, it's great that it's faster for us, but I think in terms of student perception, it's been really valuable because students like the idea that they're getting partial credit on multiple choice problems. I think in their perception, it feels more fair is the feedback that I'm hearing. Let's see. So the next one then is a suggestion is to have a box to put answers in on the document that you're creating. So for me and my team, we have templates that we've created, and we use those templates whenever we write a problem. We'll have some little answer area on the screen. And what that does for us is it allows us to use Gradescope to very quickly make different groups of different answers that were given by students. So it's not really changing. In fact, it isn't changing how we would assign points to students or how students would earn points. What's changing is behind the scenes in terms of how we're able to categorize the answers that students are giving us. And then we can still do a deep dive into all of the different answer types and look at, okay, well, this is the collection of students who got the right answer and they showed their work correctly and used great notation. And then we might have a different pile for students who got the right answer. However, some miracle occurred that got them there, and we know that the work doesn't justify that process. There's still a misunderstanding there somehow. But that answer box is super helpful. The other
Christa,
part, yeah, totally.
before we stray too far from the multiple choice, we have a question.
Yeah.
The question is, to use the partial credit option on multiple choice, is it best to not use the bubble sheet?
You mean like a Scantron sort of sheet over here?
Yeah, it sounds like the question is around how to give partial credit for a multiple choice question.
So when I do it in my class, it'll look exactly like what you see on the screen right here. And in fact, I just took a screenshot of an old problem to share with you. So when I'm asking students to work on this problem number 3, this is the actual piece of paper that they get. And I think I screenshotted out some of the space that I gave them in order to show their work on this problem, but it is our expectation in the classes that we teach that they're going to show their work on the actual piece of paper where the question is typed, not on a separate Scantron.
So just to confirm to the person who asked the question, you can receive partial credit on multiple choice bubble sheet assignments within the Gradescope interface. We have a second question that just popped up. When you group by answer, doesn't Gradescope grade the entire group together? Actually, I'll save that question until we get to some tips on grouping. So stand by, Cheryl. We'll get back to you shortly.
Okay, I'm glad people have questions. This is great. Okay, so where was I? Oh, okay. So in terms of this sheet that I'm showing you here on the left-hand side, I obviously wanted to share with you this answer box, and parenthetically, I have different sizes of answer boxes in my templates depending on whether I'm asking students to give me a numerical value, a scalar value that's an answer, or maybe some big triple integral that they need to set up, then they're going to need a bigger answer box. So that's something to keep in mind with your template. And I'm happy to share the templates that I use with Leslie if anybody is interested in seeing them in LaTeX. The final quick tip that I would give is that I've learned that Gradescope is happier if an answer and the problem itself are on a single sheet of paper. So in other words, if I give problem number 7 and maybe number 7 needs a lot of space, it's nice to have all of number 7 on this single sheet of paper rather than have it roll over onto the next page. So I like to have my question and answer on a single sheet. And then the last thing that I do religiously is I make sure that on every assignment that I give, there's a place for students to write their names. And I require that they do so. Let's see if I click on this, if you can see it. See down here at the bottom of the page for this particular assignment, there's a blank for the name and the section in which they're enrolled. And that's something that I systematically do on every single assignment and every single page they turn in. I just use a footer and it puts it there. The reason I do that is because if we're going to scan in a multi-page assignment, we have to cut off the staples, and the possibility always exists of dropping that pile of paper. And so I'm just the cautious type and would much rather have names on every single sheet of paper in case of the event that anyone should ever drop a pile of paper. So yeah, that's my basic collection of tips based on kind of assignment writing and putting some thought into formatting ahead of time so that things go really smoothly on the grading end of things. Then the next tip that I have, this is one of my favorite ones actually, is in terms of exam efficiency. We actually gave an exam last night, and one of the things that I asked some of the team members was like, hey, are you bringing a pair of scissors to the exam? Because as students turn in their exams, that is a moment in time that usually is not spent as efficiently as other points in time in our work lives. And so it's kind of a great time to clip those staples off as you put them in the folder that you're collecting papers in. So bringing an exam, bringing a scissor to the exam is definitely helpful. And then the other thing that I do, as you can tell, I'm fairly cautious, is as students are handing in their exams, I always ask and check, did you write your name on each page? Did you make sure to put it there? Because obviously if I'm standing there with a scissor cutting off staples, we want to know that we can get their work bundled back together if I fumble with those scissors and somehow drop some papers. So simple tip, but a good time saver. Then the next tip that I have is in terms of putting, or collection of tips, I should say, is in terms of putting responsibility in the hands of the students, engaging them in the assignment submission process. And I love this picture of the skeptical child here. This essentially was me before the semester. Oya and Gal at Gradescope kept asking me, have you tried student submission yet? I think you'll really like it. They were really encouraging me to try this means of having students upload their own work into Gradescope. And I was fairly skeptical that this was going to work on a broad scale, and that there wouldn't be problems with bad scans or pages out of order or just shenanigans, general student shenanigans. So what I did is I thought, okay, let's give it a go. If it doesn't work, fine. And of course, as with pretty much everything in Gradescope, I love it. It's fantastic. We have students turn in their assignments 3 times a week, every day that our class meets. And for these assignments, what we've learned is to set out expectations very clearly from day one. So we have a list of yeah, I don't want to call them rules, but it's essentially some recommendations. Make sure that the pages you're submitting are scanned in order. Make sure they're not upside down. Make sure that we can see the picture. We don't need to see pictures of everything else on your desk in the image, because that doesn't, as interesting as that may be, that doesn't really help Gradescope all that much. So we found that by giving this list of instructions and really just right from the get-go saying, hey, if you don't meet these criteria, then we're not going to be able to process the work. We found that after the first assignment, pretty much every single student makes sure that that the work is up to par, because they want to earn their grade and they want to see their feedback. So absolutely invaluable. And I'm really grateful to Oya and Gal for just encouraging us to try this. Now, 2 other things I learned in terms of student uploads are as follows. For us, because we use the advanced features in Gradescope, we use the AI grouping features. Fixed length assignments are super important to us. And simply put, all that means is that we have students submit their solutions on a homework sheet that we give to them, or a sheet that they get out of their manual that they buy in the bookstore. And that's so that we don't have one student who turns in 6 pages of work for problem number 1, whereas another student might turn in just 2 inches of work or 5 centimeters of work for problem number 1. So that fixed length allows Gradescope to do its job, and we really like Gradescope to do its job with this AI processing. And then the other thing that I've learned is students love to stay up late, generally, at least here, and they really enjoy having a later time when their assignments are due. They get together and work in the evenings on these assignments, and this 11:59 p.m. deadline is really to avoid the midnight mix-up of, oh, is it midnight Monday, or does that mean Tuesday morning, or we just don't dance that dance. It's 11:59 p.m. in our time zone, and that works well for us. There's no ambiguity. So yeah, this is the collection of quick tips related to student responsibility of uploads in Gradescope. So that would be students scanning in their own work.
Hey, Krista, we've gotten some good questions around the student side of things.
Yay! Okay.
The first question is, how have you found the readability of students' work when scanned? And how do you cope with the variability of the quality of the scan depending on how students have done this?
Okay. So the readability of the work, we essentially will tell students, if we can't read it, we can't grade it. So they themselves have a pretty good gauge as to whether or not what they're seeing is blurry on on the image that they themselves took. And then there are, with every assignment, there will be a small handful that are unreadable because they were upside down, or you know, in the minority, these a student or two who still haven't gotten the message that we need the problems submitted in order and not upside down. We have graded points off for that, but we also communicate with them through Gradescope about what the issue is with their scan and how it can be fixed, and can obviously talk to them in person. It was something that I was extremely concerned about before we started this process, and that's where my reluctance was, oh gosh, you know, how much is this going to be an issue? So that's why it took me a while to give this a go in our course, especially on a larger scale. But I have to say that with these clear expectations, that this list here is an actual list that we've posted before on the learning management system. But yeah, it's really, students want their work graded. They want to earn their grades, and if they know that these are the expectations, then they're going to do that if you lay it out and they know that it won't be graded otherwise. So I think for us, it's been a very pleasant discovery that students really will rise to the occasion, and they're so tech savvy. They can take better pictures than I can, much more efficiently.
Awesome. There are two other questions, and I think you've kind of answered one of them. But how do students typically submit their work? And then the second question is, are these assignments handwritten and then captured as photos or converted to PDFs, or are students filling in PDF forms?
Okay. I have a colleague who has gone the PDF route. I don't use PDF forms myself for Calc 3 because with multivariable calculus, I think it would be extremely time consuming to get students to type up these equations and somehow submit them into an Adobe form. But for stats, I know that is a beautiful way to go. For us, the way that we do it is we will actually have an assignment, and I can show you, go back over here. We'll have something somewhat similar to what you see here on the screen. It's not an exam, but it'll be an activity, and maybe it's a 2 or 3 page assignment that's due that evening. The students will actually have a PDF that's printed out on a piece of paper that looks like this. They will handwrite their assignments on that PDF. So they have to write on the actual assignment that we formatted and created, that they can then print out, or either, you know, purchase, or in a bookstore, or whatever you want to do, or you could print out and give to the students. But they will actually write their work on this piece of paper as you see on the screen, or they can do that online. Some students like to write answers through Adobe or through some other app that lets you write on the screen. They'll write onto the PDF, save it, and then upload in Gradescope. So when you create an assignment in Gradescope, as an instructor, the instructor has the power to either decide whether that's a student uploaded assignment or an instructor scanned in an assignment for grading. So we would choose student upload, and then students can either just upload the PDF that they filled in or that they edited, or they can take a picture and upload that photograph. We have the students actually, sorry, let me get back over here. We have the students convert their photographs to PDFs with an app. I know that there's one that Gradescope had recommended. I can't remember the name of it. The fact that I can't remember the name of it is a testament to the fact that it goes well, because I don't need to know the name of it. So we post that information at the beginning of the semester, and students are pretty tech savvy in terms of finding free apps that they can convert a JPEG to a PDF, and they love the fact that they can turn in their assignments that way, is the feedback that I'm getting. Hope that answers the question. Are there any more questions, Leslie, or
there are quite a few, but I think we can go ahead and move on, and we'll follow up with these folks separately as needed.
Okay. Well, the fact that there are questions is fantastic.
Yeah, keep them coming, guys. Thank you so much.
Okay. So let's see. That was student responsibility. Efficiency after the exam. So let's say you gave an exam like we did last night, and now it's time to get going on the grading. The things that I've learned that really save some time are the following. The first is to scan in small batches. Small varies from person to person, but I don't like the batches that I scan to get any higher than maybe like half a centimeter, maybe a centimeter tall in terms of the stack of paper that I'm feeding into the scanner. And that's not because Gradescope can't handle it. It's because, you know, it's a scanner, and copiers can sometimes do weird things. They get jammed, and if you have small batches, then rescanning a small batch is much less time consuming than having to rescan a large batch. Not only that, but a lot of the time these copiers or scanners that folks are using will either email those PDFs or put the PDF file onto a USB stick. And if you're using email, the size of the attachment might matter depending on your system at your institution. So we've just found smaller batches work really well for us. Then there's my name tag yet again. I like to match names in batches, so I'll upload the scans to Gradescope, and Gradescope does a phenomenal job of matching names to students in terms of what it's able to read. But the names are written by human beings, and so that means that sometimes they may be more artistic and have more of a calligraphy flair than other times. And so for the few that aren't matched up with the gradebook name by Gradescope, I just like to process that as they come in, rather than first uploading 500 exams and then having a longer list to look at or scan over in terms of making sure that the right name has been matched to the right student. And then the other bit that I've learned in terms of efficiency after the exam is to keep the originals until the end of the semester. We do this because, well, you never know if there's some part that maybe scanned in really light, or perhaps the student decided in the middle of a problem to use a turquoise colored pen, or maybe they wrote really, really small, and it happens very rarely, maybe once or twice a semester in a course of the size that I'm working on, but it matters. So when we have a student who says, you know, I think I wrote more here, or if we can't read the work that the student wrote, then we want to be able to go back and find the original exam and make sure that they get all the points that they earned on that exam. So keeping them in a file cabinet for us is a great idea. So that is the last tip I have in terms of exam efficiency. I'll pause for a second in case there's a question here, and otherwise move on. Let's see. So I'll briefly talk about team grading, and I know that not all of you who are participating today grade in teams. So this may not apply as much for you, but you may find something here anyway. At MSU, Montana State, we have very large undergraduate math courses, and so we grade as a team. And when we grade as a team, after having implemented use of Gradescope, it really changed our approach to doing this. So it used to be that we would meet as a team in the pre-Gradescope days to discuss how we would grade these problems ahead of time. And then a lot of that discussion was based more on kind of intuition or some gauge of perception in terms of how we thought students were doing, or what we thought the biggest mistakes were, or the most frequent mistakes were. And now that's totally changed. Our approach is quite the opposite. We can quantify very quickly what student mistakes are the most common. And the way that we do that is we start with grouping those more common types of mistakes. So before we even meet as a team, what we'll do is we'll say, okay, make some broad groups. Go through a good representation of the exams, a good number of exams. Make some broad groups so that you get an understanding of what the big picture sort of categories are in terms of student mistakes. And then after that grouping is when we'll actually meet as a team. And the conversations are pretty different than what they were before. It's fascinating, actually. They can be really exciting conversations because we have the data to show us exactly where the misunderstandings are. We can see how many students have been grouped into different categories, and then talk about point distributions. And of course, there's a lot to talk about. We can also sometimes get a little bit lost in the weeds and start to think about things like, how are we going to change our approach? But we try to resist temptation at that point, really focus on what are the groups that we've made, not get too lost on small subcategories, and really look at the big picture here. So that's been very effective for us, is to switch the mentality in terms of how we approach this group grading. Then in terms of grouping, so this part of the talk for a couple minutes is about an advanced feature in Gradescope. So if you use the artificial intelligence grouping feature, then that's what I'm referring to here. If you don't use the feature yet, then I would definitely encourage you to check it out with Gradescope and learn more. It's been a phenomenal tool for us, and I'm going to tell you about how we use that and how we found it to be most efficient. So for us, the big picture idea is that we start with making really big and very coarse groups. So if I'm grading a problem of a particular type, I'll maybe lump all of the students who got the correct final answer into a group, all of the students who got an incorrect answer that was negative, I'm making something up, but negative number, all the students who got the incorrect answer that was 0, but some really big groups. And then after that, first run through of putting all of the students into maybe one of 3 or 4 or 5 groups, then I'll go back into those groups and I'll make those groups smaller. I'll break them into smaller subgroups so that I can give more meaningful feedback. So even in the case of students who got the right answer, I'll find myself, and what we do is, as a team, is to go back into that collection of students who got the right answer and then take a deeper look and say, okay, this is fantastic. They got the right answer. And let's see if there are any students in this pile who could use some guidance on notation. Even though they got the right answer, the way that they're communicating about the math could use some refinement, and we want to give feedback on that. So we'll pull all of those out and put them in their own category. And then maybe we want to take all the students who got the right answer through means of a miracle and try to understand the miracle a little bit more, and maybe give some more feedback there. So the big picture idea is that at least for the team that I work on, what we've found to be the most efficient and effective way of using the artificial intelligence grouping tool is have it run in Gradescope, then make some really big course collections, and then break those down into more narrow collections that are narrow enough for us to give meaningful feedback, but also not too narrow so that, you know, we end up in one-by-one grading again. And then the last tip in terms of grouping and using these advanced features is that we've found that having meaningful names to the groups that we create is very helpful. And so what I gave you here is a name of a group that is completely not meaningful and not how we would approach things in our course. So I went in and I doctored this last night to take a screenshot, and then quickly changed it back to what it was before. But we've learned that descriptive names that tell us what the problem was for that particular group, and including perhaps the number of points that are going to be associated with whatever that descriptive mistake was, helps us be more efficient in terms of putting student papers into those groups, maybe coming back at a later time and taking a deeper look and analyzing things more. And as a habit, at least on the team that I work on, we just really try to stay away from stuff like this because our team really prefers to approach things as correctly as possible. So if a student were to see this, that just wouldn't send the right message in any way. A student shouldn't ever see our group names, but as a rule, we try to really stay away from anything that doesn't feel good in terms of the possibility of them seeing it. So yeah, definitely going with some sort of, this is how many points I think this is worth, and a descriptive title in terms of what the error might be.
Hey, Krista, we've got a question. How do you actually create smaller groups from the original groups created by the AI?
Okay. Yeah, so this is something that we've figured out how to do fairly efficiently. So if you create these course groups first, and every single assignment has been assigned into a group, so there are no more assignments that are left floundering on their own. They've all found their homes in terms of a big group. Then when you're in that, let's say, a group of all of the students who got the right answer, and you'd like to form a group of students who got the right answer through a miracle, what I do is I'll look at all the students who got the right answer. I will remove from that group all of the students who got the right answer through the miracle. And then the only papers that I'll see on my screen that are not grouped are the ones who need to be in a new, smaller group. So I hit select all and create the smaller subcategory. I hope that makes sense. For those of you who are using the grouping feature, I think it will make sense. The key is to make sure that all student work has been grouped before you start the process of breaking it into these smaller groups. Because if you have everybody in a group, then removing the right pieces from that group and only having those papers as the ones who are removed allows you to hit select all and do it in about 10 seconds. Create that subgroup. Okay, I'm assuming that I answered that question well, and we will move on. And if you have any more questions, I'm happy to explain more, obviously. Okay, course statistics. This is where I get really excited about Gradescope. I have learned that it really is a game changer to give problems descriptive names. So when I'm creating the outline of an assignment in Gradescope, when I first create that assignment, there's that option to match the region on the page to whatever problem it is, number one, number two, etc. In that process, I like to give each problem a descriptive name in terms of the content. And then I will use tags one layer deeper than that to tie mathematical concepts to whatever the content was for that particular problem, so that once we're done grading, I can see immediately where students performed well, where they didn't perform well, and I can associate those tags to their performance. So what I did here is I created an example that I'd like to show you that illustrates how I've been able to use this effectively. So let's see if I can make this bigger. Oh boy. There we go. Okay, so what you see on the screen here is the results of an exam that we gave a while back. And for this exam, I can immediately see when I'm looking at the statistics page for the grades that there's this one problem that did not go so well. And so when I see that this problem 1 part 4 didn't go so well, then I'd like to understand what happened there. So I scroll down to that particular problem and I can see that I gave it a descriptive name. So I know that out of this collection of true false problems, this was related to a directional derivative. And then I'd also tagged this problem with the concept of directional derivative. So I can go back to the exam, look at the problem pretty quickly, say, okay, well, do they not understand directional derivatives, or is it something about this problem in particular in terms of how it's written, or what are we asking about? Are we asking about notation or something else? So here, what I've done is I've switched screens from looking at the outline statistics to the tag statistics. And in doing so, I can see that in general, my problems related to directional derivatives are going pretty well. And in fact, if you look here, you can see that, yeah, the bar, there's nothing that stands out here in terms of directional derivatives being something that we need to worry about in general. And so in doing this analysis, then I was able to go back and look at this problem, look at the exam again, and realize this problem was about how to read directional, what a directional derivative is in a particular notation, and that in general problems related to this concept went quite well, but in terms of notation, I need to work a little bit harder with the students so that they can understand how to read this particular form of notation related to this concept. So extremely powerful information that we get within you saw how long this took. This took about 57 seconds, and that included my explaining it to you. So pretty amazing stats and ability to analyze student performance near immediately after, immediately after an assignment has been graded. So that's an incredibly powerful tool for us. So that is the tips on course statistics, which I probably should have summarized a little bit better. The key for us, the key tip here is to give the problems descriptive names and to use tags as well as just the descriptive name associated with that problem, because the combination of the two allows you to dig deeper into what's going on for particular problems and associated concepts on an exam in terms of student performance. And of course, these data have changed our planning. So with this example that I gave you just a few minutes ago, looking at these stats and how we use descriptive names and tags to analyze student performance, the real takeaway is that it's allowed us to make changes to our instruction in real time. So those changes go along with how much time we spend on a particular concept. If we're grading homework, and this sort of data analysis was associated with an assignment that we're working on, and we know that that assignment concept that students missed was very important moving forward in the course, then we could adjust how much time in class we're spending on that. Maybe we want to take a few more days and really make sure that there's deep learning and understanding of that concept. We can adjust our materials. Maybe something needs to be done in terms of rewording a question, or maybe we need to write more problems so that students can have more graded feedback associated with what we're doing. And maybe we need to look at the approach in general. Is the way that we're teaching this concept something that needs to be refined or changed, adjusted? So in terms of lesson planning, what I've learned, and the tip here, is to really make use of these stats that that you have available to you, and that it's not just something that can be used from one semester going into the next, but that it's something that you can use as you plan your lessons in real time. So that's phenomenally powerful. And then the last collection of tips or thoughts that that I have for you is in terms of the tools that Gradescope gives you. Really, we have a tool that allows us to give meaningful feedback to students in a very timely manner. It's not just an answer checker. Gradescope allows us to do a lot more than that. And with the combination of more meaningful feedback more regularly, with immediate statistics available to us, what that means is that we're able to use these data for reports that need to be written at institutions, perhaps in terms of accreditation, what curriculum choices should be made in the course. And in my job as student success coordinator, I can really use these data and think about how we as a team can harness them to either demonstrate student success within that semester, or from semester to semester, or learn about how we can help students be more successful in the course. And then, of course, the last part is that all of these data, they're electronic. They're available at your fingertips, and they can be used for research in education. So that too is something very powerful. So my tip would be to encourage you to think about Gradescope and its use beyond just giving students feedback, and broaden that perception in terms of thinking about how you can use it in your broader work as at an institution and what it provides to you. And then the last part that I have to go in this way, is I had to share this with you all because I'm a runner, and so a new runner, I should say. And this shirt really speaks to me. And when I saw it, I thought, oh my gosh, that explains part of my relationship with grading, because I feel like grading can be so challenging for us in education. It can be a part of the job that's tough. And Gradescope has really changed a lot of that for me. It's changed my approach to grading. It's changed how I feel about grading. and so I would love it if there was a shirt that existed out there that said this, and thought I would share it with you because it gives me a chuckle. And I thought it might do the same for you. And I do want to give credit where credit is due. This is by Brendan Leonard, this original shirt, who some of you may know him. He has a fantastic following on Instagram and makes hilarious cartoons. But yeah, I hope that somehow your love affair with Gradescope has been stoked as well. And yeah.
We've got some good questions coming through the Q&A. For those that are still with us, please don't be shy about adding some more. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I'm sure Christa would be happy to answer your questions. To start, one comment that I suspect many people agree is that there are a lot of students are a bit confused on how to read through the rubric. Do you have any advice or suggestions on how to help students use the feedback more effectively?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found to be really helpful, and we learned after our first semester using Gradescope, is that it can really pay off to just take a few minutes in class and walk students through that. So show them before the stakes are high and they're really trying to get to some problem, and maybe they're in a state that is less open to learning. Take them at a moment in time where they're not in that place, and for 5 minutes walk them through how to access their graded work, how to print it off. I know Oya has links on the help page. It's all very simple, but as with any technology, I think that it can be nice to spend the 5 minutes doing it when the stakes are low, rather than when students are stressed and want to find a grade and just need to know how they did on this one problem. So that's been helpful for us. We found that students are pretty good at navigating their way through that. The other thing, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that we did that has also helped us is at the top of the rubric, we have one rubric item. It's a +0 rubric item, and it says, please see comments below. And we click that whenever we have a student who had the right answer and maybe got a perfect score or a high score, but we would still like to call attention to whatever written comments we've made or typed up comments we've made. So that's been helpful for us, those two.
Christa, we've got some other questions from the student side of things.
Okay.
One question starts off with a comment. Pages out of order are annoying, but not difficult to deal with in Gradescope. Do you dock points for consistent behavior in this regard?
Well, so in terms of pages being out of order, we simply have told students we won't grade them if they're out of order. That's been our approach. While I agree you can go into Gradescope and fix the ordering of those pages, can't remember how easy it is for student upload to do that. Yeah, I guess I can go in and see that. We just don't do it. That's been our approach, is like, if you want your work graded, turn it in order, and they pretty much get with the program pretty darn quickly. In our case, our philosophy is, this is a 200 level class, and turn the work in the right order. So yeah, that's how we do it. So even though it may not be that big of a deal to move around in Gradescope, I think when the difference for us might be that we're processing a huge amount of work for many, many, many students, and each one of these little things can really add up in time. And so our policy is just turn it in order. That's how it should be. And honestly, I can pretty confidently say that at least 99% of our students do.
Hey, Krista, what percentage of your students do in fact upload their homework via Gradescope? And how does this compare to the percentage who submitted their work in the pre-Gradescope dark ages?
Oh gosh. Oh, it's night and day. I can't even tell you. So 100% of our students turn their Gradescope. So we have activities due every day of the week that class meets. 100% of those students who finish their homework and decide to upload it do the student upload. So we literally get hundreds of assignment submissions per day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Then in terms of what it used to look like, it used to look like this. And this is, I mean, these are the actual folders. I was talking to one of the TAs on the team last night, and he was like, oh, you should, look at these folders when I was coming in to take this picture of the alphabetizer. And I was like, oh my gosh, I remember those days. It was awful. Because I would walk into class and I would put I would space out these 4 folders, and students whose last name were in the A through C category would go into yellow, and students whose last name were in, I don't know, whatever the next category was. As you can see, the N through Z was its own big folder. And then we would take those piles, we would have to physically hand them off to each other to share the grading load when this was just for homework. But then we would have to alphabetize all of these assignments so that we could enter them in the gradebook. Just the process of alphabetizing, tallying points, and entering in the gradebook would take a good hour per assignment. That's gone. That doesn't exist for us anymore. So now this whole process has been eliminated from everything. And that's huge, not just from my perspective as an instructor, but also in terms of student time, because students aren't spending time in class putting their homework at the front of the page of the classroom in the right folder. They don't have to have a folder that they go to get their assignments back. They don't have to wait until the next time class meets to get their work back. So that's been a game changer too, in terms of being able to give feedback and publish that feedback whenever it's done, what the grading is done. So if we pick up an assignment on a Monday, and or for example, this exam that we just gave, if we decide that we want to publish the grades over the weekend, we could do so if that's the decision that we're made. I don't know that we'll publish exam grades on a weekend, but for an assignment like a homework, sure, why not? Then students get their feedback and they can start working on correcting misconceptions or misunderstandings immediately. So yeah, so that's the contrast between student upload, which is down here in terms of this list of expectations, and then students take care of it, and I think they prefer it.
Hey, Krista, we've got time for one more question, and I'm going to kind of consolidate 2 of them in one. Do you usually report Gradescope scores back to students in Gradescope via your institution's LMS, or both?
So students can see the number of points that they earned on an assignment in Gradescope, but that's, for us, in our case, that's not the same as the grade that they earned. So we upload them into the LMS, and then the LMS, in our case, it's D2L. You might have Blackboard or, something else, Canvas. That's the LMS for our institution, is where they actually see their grades. We think of Gradescope as a means of communicating about their performance on problems, but not the numerical value that would be tied to assessment that ends up in their grade book at the end of the semester. But that's just how we do it. I don't know that Gradescope has the ability to calculate an average or anything like that. I've never seen anything like that on there. I think the LMS is where where all of that happens at the institution. And Gradescope really is where we publish the graded work. Students see the feedback. They can see points earned. They can see a tally of those points, but for us, we translate that into a grade on the learning management system.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christa. We really appreciate your time. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from folks on the phone who have found a lot of your tips to be very helpful. I appreciate everyone's for joining us. If there were questions that you still have, as always, feel free to send an email to help@gradescope.com, and the customer success team will be very eager to get back to you. Thank you all. For those that are interested in the recording, we will share that out with you sometime within the next day or so. So keep an eye out on your inbox. Thanks again. Take care.